Welcome back to the table. Ryan and I just played Match of the Century. This is a recreation, if you will, of the match between Spassky and Fischer. This is a classic chess match in history.
They called it the match of the century.
That's what they called it. That's what they're calling the game.
It became one of the definitive moments of the Cold War, and I think maybe still the only time that America won the World Chess Championship.
Oh, that I don't know.
Yeah, so I was reading about it. I was reading about it because there is a actual historical document.
Pretty hefty.
That's bigger than the rule book.
Yeah.
That actually goes through all the entire history of like why this match was so important, what led up to it. But it was the Russian champion Spassky who was coming back versus Bobby Fischer, and you're playing as one of those two characters. So this is from Capstone Games. This kind of feels in some ways like a follow-up to Watergate.
Very much.
At least in that same kind of feel, that same size box, similar look to the game. The idea that you're playing cards, you're each taking on one of those iconic historical roles. Yeah, tug of war over a bunch of elements and asymmetric decks for your characters, although not as asymmetric as Watergate.
No.
And the game itself is very, very different.
Yes, the game is very different, although it feels like that same DNA. You'd imagine, and this is from a different designer too.
Yeah.
But it definitely feels like it has some of that same DNA. But the game you're playing is, I don't want to say it's an abstraction of chess.
But it is.
But it kind of is an abstraction of an abstract game.
It's an abstract version of abstract chess. Okay, so, well, it's very cool the way that they designed this game to kind of represent chess in certain ways. Like, you're looking at the board, and it does look like a chessboard. Your score tracker is actually a king. The first player marker is a queen. And you have all these pawns that you can play out on the board in these actual spaces. And instead of, making actual chess moves on the board, you're playing cards. But look at that. Look at how the cards just kind of lay there and fill in that space. It's just really, really a lot of attention to detail here.
And each of those cards represents a chess piece, but not in a strict sense. It's just kind of flavor. There's a chess piece there. And then some of these cards have some historical factoids related to the card's power. Yeah. So let us tell you what we're doing here. And just to go over the components, Ryan touched on everything other than the fact that we each have two asymmetric decks.
Yep.
And even in those decks, you can see the card here is going to have a white side and a black side. And it represents the two different colors in chess. And each basically round, or what they call a game in this, you're going to play either the white or the black. And it always follows this queen. So Ryan would be playing white cards first. I'd be playing black. So you just flip over your hand accordingly. And the cards you play, in this case, I'd have to play with the black side up. In this case, I'd have a power that might come into play if I lose.
Yeah, so they're multi-use cards in that every time you're playing a card, you're having to decide if it's worth it to play that card now, or do I want to save it because you know that the next game, as they call it, the round, you're going to be playing as the other side. So it's maybe worth it to keep some of those high-value black cards, even if I'm white right now. But there's a lot that goes into deciding what card to play because, like David said, some of these cards have abilities if you lose. Some of them have different strengths. And also, you're kind of determining whether or not you want to win any one of these particular zones because each zone is worth a different amount of points from 1 to 4 points. So you might not care so much about winning the 1-point zone, but you really care about winning that 4-point zone.
Yeah, and to take the theme a little bit further, those zones are called the exchanges, meaning those are our exchanges, sort of strategic exchanges during a game.
I move the bishop, I move a pawn, you move your rook,
and the games,
abstractly.
The games are the rounds. So when you play, you're going to play in these exchanges, and those points that you get are your advantage, they say. And as you win these exchanges, this advantage marker is going to move accordingly. So if I won this exchange, I'm going to get 4 advantage on this track. This is the tug of war that's going on here. At the end of a game, which is when we're done with all the exchanges, we're going to look at this, and whoever's won the advantage simply moves their king 1 space towards this middle section. Someone reaches that, they've won.
Yeah. Now, the real interesting thing that I think that this game does is the way it handles ties. So every time you're placing a card down, you have a value, and that's just your strength. You have the option to augment that by playing pawns, and there's a whole economy here of playing cards to earn pawns and then spending pawns to boost your strength. When you place a card, whoever is first has to make the tough decision to play the card. Once I lay it down, I say my value is 5. This is not modifiable anymore. The ball is, or the piece is solely in David's
on my
hand.
side. Mixed metaphors abound. It is my turn after that, and you're kind of at a bit of an advantage playing second because you at least know exactly what you're up against. There's no sort of like, reveal.
Yeah.
I can look at this and he's like, he's got a 5. If I beat a 5, I'm going to win this exchange and the 3 advantage.
Yep.
Now, some other things I might want to take into consideration when I'm doing that is his power. He has an effect here that is going to fire off before I get my advantage if I win this because he loses.
Yep.
If he wins this, he doesn't get that power. He just simply gets the advantage. And then hopefully I've played a card here that would give me some sort of power like this. But there are some cards in here, if I lost by playing this, this power's upside down, so it's only for when I'm playing it as white.
Yeah,
so this would just be a straight up loss.
Right.
But let's say I played this. Let's see, you got a 3.
I got a total
I
of
could
5 right
play
there.
a 4, and I could put my 2 pawns, saying I really wanted to win this, for example. So now I'm winning 6-5.
Yeah.
So I've won, but before I get my advantage, he's going to fire off his power. In this case, what is that power?
This power lets me actually discard the whole thing and make it like it never happened.
Yeah.
The powers are wild in the game.
Yeah.
They could gain you on this track. They can help you draw more cards. They can hinder your opponent, or they can change your mental endurance track. And this kind of represents your mental fortitude. As this moves up and down throughout the game, you're going to be getting more pawns and more cards every round. And so you really do need to be cognizant. It's good to ask what's the power of your card before you decide whether or not you're going to
100%.
beat it. Now, you can kind of put your opponent in a really tough space by playing a card like if they win, they're going to win. But if they lose, they're going to get some really cool power. I don't want either one of those things to happen. And that's kind of the situation you want to be in. However, there's one more thing you can do. And this is where I was referring to the cool thing. If you tie them, nothing happens.
Yes.
So if you're in that situation where you can't let them win and you don't want to let them get the power, you can literally just tie them and it's like nothing happened. Nobody gets the points. Nobody gets their abilities. And that is a very strategic move in the game.
Yeah, there is a fair amount of mind games here. Probably not as much as you'd experience from something like Watergate.
No, it's
Watergate
different, for
definitely has more of a long game with some things that you've got, like different variables that you're moving around the board. This one feels, at least, we've only played it twice, but it feels like it has less than that. But it definitely tries to embrace more of that chess theme in terms of just the tactical, strategical moves you're making after each piece is moved. You've played your bishop. Okay, now I've got to sit here and think, what do I want to do? What cards do I have in my hand? Do I just lose this, holding on to my higher value cards that I currently have so that I can win here and get 4 advantage back? A lot of things going on in your mind.
Yeah, there's definitely levels to that because you're making that decision for each one of these. Is it worth it to win or lose this one? Now, you're also making that decision for a whole game. If your opponent wins a game, they move their king 1 space towards the center. That might not be the end of the world. So there's some situations where you could actually forfeit if you have a really, like if I'm playing white and all the cards in my hand are really good for black, I might just forfeit and let David have the point, knowing that I'm not having to play one of these really good black cards.
Yeah, there's also some wild cards. We'd mentioned this earlier. Yeah. I want to show one of them that I used a fair amount in our games. This is a 0, and you'd think, well, why would you want to play a 0? Well, in this case, if I lose with a 0, which, by the way, it's pretty easy to lose with a 0,
right,
unless someone decides not to play there.
Or to tie it, or to resign,
yep. But when I lose with this power, I get this power that allowed me for all of the other unresolved exchanges. So say I played it here, and I chose to, when I lost, to resign the game, like Ryan said. He gets the point automatically, but then my mental endurance goes up as many unresolved exchanges there are, in which this case would be 3. So I'd go way up here, meaning that I'm getting a max hand size, I'm starting the round with 1 advantage already, and getting 3 pawns at the beginning of the round. That is a great place to be in towards the beginning of the game. Now, this is likely to go back down because there are ways, when you win the 4th area here, you can go down. There's other cards that might force you to, down. So there's a lot of things going on in terms of when you're playing your cards here. And like we said, you play each game, and when we say game, it's not the overall game, but each game is effectively a round. and someone's going to move on
every
this
game.
track.
Somebody's going to win. Somebody's going to win each game.
Or if it's tied, both people move forward one space. But as soon as someone gets here, the match or the game,
the match as they call it,
the match is over.
They use real chess terms.
Yes.
A match is comprised of many different games, and every time this king moves, that represents one game played. I know that's a little.
That was actually a bit of
confusing.
information I was aware of. I didn't know a chess match was a series of games.
Yeah, because
I literally
looks
thought
at your average, and that's one thing too. I think that this is different from Watergate. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about who this game is for, because definitely their target market is the Watergate players, or if you've been a fan of Watergate, this is good. This is the next big thing from Capstone. This is the next 2-player game that's going to go right on your shelf, right next to Watergate. And
same size box.
And it's different enough. Well, yeah, and same kind of logo.
Yeah, the logo has the similarity. This is meant to be part of the line. It's meant to be part of
that set. Yeah. So, but this is different enough. Like David alluded to earlier, Watergate is all about long-term victory. You're planning out this strategy. Depending on which side you are, you have to do this one specific thing. This game is a series of matches, and you're going to win some matches. I'm sorry, a series of games. You're going to win some games. You're going to lose some games. And a lot of it is very short term. Do I need to win this game? Now, You're not thinking long term. You're thinking, do I need to win this game? So it hits a lot of different buttons for better or worse than Watergate does. So I don't think that you'd ever get they're not too similar. There's reason to have both of them.
100%. I'd already seen, once they announced this game, people saying, is this just reskinned Water?
Not at all.
It is 100%
As you can tell by this point in the video, you should be able to tell.
Absolutely. It feels like it. It has some of that same DNA, just like in the tug-of-war gameplay, the card play a little bit. But there's so many differences, not only with the sort of meta game of what you're doing, but also even minor differences like you cycle through these cards.
Yeah.
In Watergate, you lose a lot of the cards out of the game as you're playing. That does not happen in this game. And in fact, the degree to which you cycle through this has an impact on your mental fortitude, or mental endurance is what they call it. Every time you reshuffle, it's going to go back down. So you want to be careful about cycling through your cards too much.
And I do also think that this is a more accessible theme than Watergate for a lot of people that were like, Watergate, I don't know, Nixon something, whatever. That game actually, there's a lot of history in that game. There's a lot of history in this game, but this is a worldwide phenomenon. And of course, chess, right? So bringing people into playing this game of saying it's not chess, but the theme is chess, which is an interesting thing to try to explain to somebody. It's not a chess game by any stretch.
No.
But it represents chess.
Yeah, I mean, I think fans of chess could see this and go, okay, this is clever. It's a clever game based around chess and a famous chess match. So who is it for? Like we just said, and this might sound obvious, people who liked Watergate and want to experience a similar type of experience, people who like chess, and I think just any fan of 2-player games, which probably overlaps with Watergate as well. This is something you can play very quickly. You can play a couple of matches.
Yeah.
Who is it not for?
Yeah. So,
who it's not for, I would say, and I apologize for making so many comparisons, but if you really want the multifaceted things of what you have to consider, I could win over here, or I could do this, maybe he's not paying attention here, of Watergate, that does not exist as much in this game.
Right, this is much more of a narrow focus thing of you're both trying to do one thing and win that one thing. I also think depending on why you love chess, you might just be enamored by the idea that this game is chess based. It does not feel like chess. It does not play like chess. You're not. It's not ticking those same boxes at all as chess. So if you're coming this is I love chess and I want to get my kids into loving chess. This is not going to be the thing that does that.
Yeah, only thematically. I mean, mechanically, there are things that you're doing in this game that make it feel like, okay, they've done something. Now let me think about what I should do. There is a lot of that in this game, just like there is in chess. But, you're limited by the cards you have in your hand. So at the end of the day, too, you've got to remember, this is not a purely deterministic game like chess. There's going to be times where you just don't have any high cards in your hand.
Yeah, and that is one thing. I think if people, you can win or lose on some luck here.
Yeah, you might pull a card, which can happen in Watergate. You might get that one card that's perfect to counter someone else's.
Yeah.
But this one...
But it doesn't happen in chess.
No, it doesn't happen in chess. And I think it happens a little bit more here because really the cards largely revolve around their values first and foremost, and then their powers. Yeah. And like Ryan said earlier, This game is a game where whenever you play this, you're going to want to look at the value that someone played, but you absolutely want to look at the power. Because if someone plays a lower card, you know that they want their power to fire off, typically.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely still a lot that goes into making every single decision that you're making. It's just different in that you're really only making one decision, and that is, well, I guess you have a couple options like win, lose, or tie, and that's really it. You're just determining that. Is it valuable right now for me to win, or is it better to tie? And is it really worth it to win when I'm only getting 3 points versus 4 points? So it does still have those meaty decisions, but I think the goal is much clearer than Watergate. When you're like, well, I kind of abstractly have to like connect these, chains back to Nixon or like whatever. This is very much in your face of like, just try to win and then you get to move your king and that's good, right?
Yeah, that is basically what you're doing. I will say it is a bit of a layered thing. It's that decision of whether to win or give something up applies to the game of moving the kings, but also to each exchange here. It kind of like trickles down and everything you're doing is like, well, do I give up here so that I can win here? Do I give up the game so that I can win next round?
Well, even winning with the card is giving up the value potentially of the other side. So yeah, there's a lot of give and take.
For sure. So anyway, that was our impressions of Match of the Century. Spassky, I had to look up the pronunciation. Spassky and Fisher, not Fisher, I knew Fisher. If you have any questions at all, please make them in the comments below. We'll get down there and answer whatever we can. We might even try to get this on the channel with a live play sometime in the near future. But until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.